programming example for text processing. In this programming example, you will learn how to read a text, output the text as is, output the number of lines, and how to use an array to count and output the number of times each letter appears in the text. An uppercase letter and a lowercase letter are treated as being the same, that is, they are tallied together. The program input file contains the text to be processed. The text is stored in a file called textin.txt. Consider the following sample text. In the text, the number of lines is 5, and the number of times the letter A appears in it is 20. B appears 0 times, and so on. Therefore, the output file contains the text, the number of lines, and the number of times a letter appears in the text. The output is stored in a file called textout.out. To write the program, first you need to design the algorithm. First, you declare the variables. Then, open the input and output files, and initialize the variables. While there is more data in the input file, for each character in a line, you need to read and write the character, and increment the appropriate letter count. Then, increment the line count. With this, output the line count and letter counts, and close the files. In order to develop a program, you need a variable to store the line count and an array of 26 components to store the letter count. The char variable helps read and store each character in turn, because the input file is to be read character by character. Because data is to be read from an input file and output is to be saved in a file, the ifstream variable in file opens the input file, and the ofstream variable out file opens the output file. You need to understand the following functions. Function initialize initializes the variable line count and letter count to 0. Function copy text reads a line and outputs the line. Function character count increments the letter count, and function write total outputs the line count and the letter count. We begin by describing the function initialize. The function initializes the variable line count and the array letter count to 0. So it has two parameters, one corresponding to the variable line count and one corresponding to the array letter count. Note that the parameter LC corresponding to line count must be a reference parameter. The for loop initializes each component of the array list to 0. The second function copy text has 4 parameters, an ifstream variable, an ofstream variable, a char variable, and the array to update the letter count. The parameter list will correspond to the array letter count. This function reads the line and outputs the line. After reading a character, it calls the function character count to update the letter count. Note that the array list is passed to the function character count so that the appropriate letter count is updated. The third function character count has 2 parameters, a char variable and the array to update the letter count. This function increments the letter count. Therefore, this function converts the letter to uppercase, as the uppercase and lowercase letters in the input file will be tallied together, and then finds the index of the array corresponding to this letter. This if statement checks if the index is valid. If it is valid, it increments the appropriate count. The last function write total has 3 parameters, an ofstream variable, the line count, and the array to output the letter count. This function outputs the line count and the letter count. Now you can describe the function main with the complete program listing. Include the fstream header file to use the ifstream and ofstream variables to read data from and write data to files, respectively. And include the cc type header file to use the function toUpper. Then, declare the function prototypes, initialize, copy text, character count, and write total. To begin the function main, you must declare the variables line count, letter count, and ch. You must also declare the ifstream variable in file to read data from a file and the ofstream variables out file to write data to a file. Then open the input file textin.txt. If the input file does not exist, exit the program. Follow this by opening the output file textout.out. Now, call the function initialize to initialize the variables line count and letter count, and read the first character, while not at the end of input file. Call the function copy text to process a line of text. Increment the variable line count and read the next character. Call the function write total to output the line count and letter count. Next, close the input and output files. Next, we type the definitions of the functions discussed earlier. The function initialize initializes the variable line count and letter count to 0. The copy text function reads a line and outputs the line. The character count function increments the letter count. And the write total function outputs the line count and the letter count. The following is a sample run of the program. It outputs the text as is, outputs the line count, and outputs the number of times each letter appears in the text.